of the World Economic Forum. As panelists, we have at the stage Erez Zaionce, Director of the Center for Fourth Industrial Revolution from Colombia. And also we have two panelists who join us online, Purushottam Kaushik, who is the Director of the Center for the Fourth Industrial Revolution from India, and also Mariam Al Muhairi, Director Center for the Fourth Industrial Revolution from Dubai. So, Mario, welcome to Colombia 4.0, and please go ahead with the panel on exchange of experience of Center for the Fourth Industrial Revolution.
Muchas gracias. Buenos días a todos. Yo quería saludarles en español.
Good morning to all. I wanted to greet you in Spanish. I am Brazilian, but this panel is going to be in English. So we have our panelists who are in India and in Dubai, and they speak English. So we hope that the discussion flow will be better if we use translation. We hope that you have your headsets if necessary. If not, we have them outside the room for you. So good morning to all. It is a pleasure to be here with you, and I would like to thank the Center. We invite them to allow them to help us moderate this, and we would like to thank the Colombian government as well. It's a pleasure to be here today. We're going to be speaking about the fourth Industrial Revolution and how the foreign plan to advance on this revolution. So allow me to change to English now and we can continue.
Okay, so I'm going to give a little introduction about what's the fourth industrial revolution very quickly, because we want to hear from our speakers and their experiences all over the world, right? So very quickly, I think everyone has some knowledge of what the fourth industrial revolution is, but I'm going to talk very fast about this. So why is it a revolution? Because it's disruptive. We are all affected by the technology advancements that we see on the screen, right? We have some examples here, but this is of course not an exhaustive list, because every day we have innovations in technology that affect our life and how we make our living, right? Economic and social impact in our lives. And why is it the fourth? Because the first one was the steam engine, the second one was electricity and production lines, and the third one was the digital revolution with computers and the internet, and now we have the fourth industrial revolution that deals with cross-cutting technologies that affect every industry and every society. For example, artificial intelligence and data, the metaverse, which is a new thing and everyone is very interested about it. We have the transition from dirty energy to clean energy and sustainable energy. We have bioeconomy and biotechnology, autonomous vehicles, drones, all these technologies that affect our lives very deeply, and that we have to be ready for them. So what are the objectives of this Center for the Fourth Industrial Revolution network that the World Economic Forum created? First is to advance technology in an inclusive and sustainable way, right? So technology will advance regardless of what we want or not. There are entrepreneurs in the world, but as the governments, they have a need to adapt regulation, adapt the rule of law, adapt institutions to make sure that these technologies benefit society. That's the rule, right? So we have to understand what are the gaps between institutions and regulations and what the companies are innovating. And we have to bridge that gap, shorten that gap as much as possible, and that requires the second objective of the Center for the Fourth Industrial Revolution network, which is create agile communities composed of public and private stakeholders, composed of all the industries that are affected by these technologies, and I mean all of them will be affected. There's no industry that will not use technology, one or all of them, right? So we have to create these agile communities to create a venue in which the public sector stakeholders and private sector stakeholders come together and find solutions together. And also, let's not forget, academia and civil society are really important as well as citizens, right? So public discourse about this is really important. And the third objective is to be do tank, not only be a talk shop or a think tank, not only discussing issues and leave it in the air. We want to create the solutions, we create roadmaps, we create guidelines and toolkits, and we aim to implement them pilot them in real-life institutions, and scale these solutions across locally. For example, if we are developing in Colombia a solution, we will choose an institution to pilot that, and then we will scale it to other institutions, to other cities, and in the end, to the other centers in the network. And one of the advantages of the network is that the centers, they talk among each others, and it's a real global network of collaborative stakeholders. And this is the current size of the network. So we are at 15 centers. We have 2 of our first ones, actually 3 of them. India is a center that has foreign staff, right? But the independent centers, the first one was the UAE, and 2 days after, Colombia came. So they are the 2 first centers, the independent centers in the network. And now we have 15. So I'm going to go from west to east, of course, starting with Colombia there. But we have Brazil, we have Rwanda, we have South Africa. In Europe, we have Norway and Serbia. And we are in Turkey, Israel, the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, and I hope I didn't forget South Africa, but it's here. Okay, so we are 15 now, and we are expanding. And what's the importance of this? We are currently in 40% of the global GDP and 30% of the global population. So the impact that the network produces achieves this magnitude, right? And since we're expanding, we want to have the solutions not only for the centers in the network, but we want the centers to be local hubs as well to develop regionally. So Colombia, for example, can develop with the Pacific Alliance, the Andean Community, etc., all these local and regional partners, right? So I hope this is a very brief introduction of the C4R network, but I think it will be clearer when we hear from our speakers what they are doing in the United Arab Emirates, in India, and in Colombia, here with Erez. These are our speakers. We're going to start with Mariam Al Muhairi. She's the head of the C4IR UAE Center, and she is in Dubai, and I would like to thank Mariam for being here on a Friday night and during your Eid holiday. But we thank you so much for being here, and I'd like to start with you. So the first question is a generic one, and we'll deep dive into the topics, okay? So our first question I would like to ask you is, what can you highlight from what the C4I UAE Center has done, and what is the impact that you have achieved so far? Thank you.
Sure. Well, first off, thank you so much. Honestly, it's a pleasure to be here, and it's so nice to be with centers also that kind of all started at a similar time. And honestly, no place I would rather be on my Eid holiday. I mean this. I'm really happy to be a part of this. In terms of the center, so we did start in 2019. We've been working on some of our projects for about 3 years now. And I think what was very interesting at the start of the center was we had very distinct portfolios. We had AI, blockchain, and precision medicine, and these were really chosen because of the strategic importance of these sectors or these areas to the UAE. We had a blockchain strategy starting about 2016. We had an AI strategy around 2017, and then a minister of AI. And then there was already a shift towards major investment in healthcare and a national genomics program. So these projects or these portfolios seemed really perfect in a way to be focusing on from the center's perspective, particularly as Mario rightly mentioned, there was a big push around kind of the governance and looking at kind of how to make these technologies more inclusive and more responsibly developed, but also to ensure that there is innovation that's driven within these portfolios. And so I think over the past 3 years, I mean, there's a lot of things to go into, and I'm sure we'll go into a lot of that in the panel. But over the past 3 years, maybe things that I'm proud to say we've launched is a number of projects in these 3 different portfolios, and I think what's also been interesting is to see kind of the journey we've gone on from 2019 to where we are now in 2020, or no, 2022. I don't even know where we are. I think COVID's killed our sense of time. And we started off in 2019 to 2020 kind of looking at governance. So I would say the impact there was really things like this blockchain toolkit that we put in place around how you kind of govern blockchain use, or how you put in place the right governance mechanisms for that. And then the next project we worked on was around AI procurement, once again, kind of a governance approach to how you procure artificial intelligence within the public sector. But from about 2020 to 2021, and I think more so perhaps in the years to come as well, we shifted towards focusing more on pilots. So similar to, again, what Mario said around the do tank, so kind of taking the theoretical aspects of the governance work that we had done and actually putting them into practice, into practical terms, to be able to see how do we actually test this technology in the real world, but then how do we also test technology in a way to understand how to regulate it, particularly given that we are a government-led entity as well. And so we had a few projects within that, but I think one, and we'll touch on that a bit later, I'm sure, was around asset tokenization. So it was really looking at blockchain from a different angle. We had looked at blockchain previously within the UAE from a logistics standpoint, from a government services standpoint, kind of a shift towards paperless strategies. But this was really looking at it from a financial or a fintech perspective. So how can we tokenize things like crowdfunding, for example? And this was really interesting for us, again, because as I mentioned, it's really shifted our focus as a center from just looking at governance on it from a theoretical perspective or a very regulatory perspective to actually piloting it and putting it into practice. And one other thing I think is not to take too much time. Another thing I think what was interesting for our shift from 2019 was also then a look into the more social aspects of the technology. So a lot of the time, I feel that we focus quite heavily, again, on the regulatory aspect or even kind of the innovation of it, but not always on the human kind of centric approach or the social impact angle. So we worked on a project also with the forum around smart toys, which are AI-powered toys, but particularly for children with learning disabilities. So we found that these sort of toys actually help children with autism because they were able to interact with them more. There wasn't the worry so much about understanding emotions or other things. And this could actually, these toys could tailor in a way their curriculum or their schooling or learning to that particular child. And this for us was a really impactful project because it took the technology and put it into something that I think we can see a real benefit from and real impact from. And I think as we move forward, hopefully, these are the sort of projects we'll focus more on, focusing on where do we have the most impact, not just from an economic standpoint, but also from a social standpoint, from a human aspect, and then ensuring, we obviously have the right infrastructure in place to support the development of this technology. We don't want to hinder it through the regulation, but also to ensure that it is, ethical and inclusive in I guess, many perspectives and respects.
Thank you very much, Mariam. It's a very interesting overview of several of the technology areas that we mentioned. Artificial intelligence, blockchain, tokenization, smart toys, use of data smartly and responsibly, especially because it relates to children, so it's very important that we are responsible in that sense. Thank you. We're going to ask you a deeper question in one of those topics later, but now I'd like to go to Puru, that's how we call him, the head of CFR India. Puru, it's the same question for you because we want to understand what the diversity of projects that we have in the network. So can you please talk a little bit about what have you done so far in CFR India and what have you achieved? Thank you very much for being here. You're in Mumbai, so it's very late. Thank you.
Thank you, Mario. Thank you. And it would have been great to be there along with you sitting on the same stage. But then it's again nice to be through the technology talking to everyone. Just like what we started our center in 2018, much earlier. And initially the phase was again focusing on technology governance. We had resources who were focusing on AI, IoT, blockchain, and also drones. But then over the journey, as we consulted and took a lot of stakeholder views from on how do we evolve, what we also realize is that sectoral transformation is one big pillar. So we have now, from 2020 onwards, we have taken an approach where sectoral transformation and technology governance are the two core pillars for our focus. The second thing which we have been working on is looking at really a wider stakeholder view, which would mean government for sure is one of the critical stakeholders. And government here in country would have two parts. One is the central government, which is mainly responsible for policies, but then also the state government, which is mainly looking at the implementation side of things. And then there are some policy decisions which the state governments also have to make. So governments are big stakeholders, while industries are certainly the larger pieces of products and innovation, but then there is a big chunk which comes in from a lot of big startup ecosystem in India. And we look at startups to bring in all the technology-led innovations as well as business innovations. There are already more than 100 unicorns here in India, and that there are in total there are more than 70,000 startups. So they form a very big part of our approach when we look at use cases, solutions, and especially the technology governance challenges for scaling. So that's on the stakeholder side. And third one, which we have been working on, is a unique approach where we look at a complete view on, first of all, we spend a lot of time on scoping an initiative. We look at a complete landscape study with regard to what are the kind of various challenges which are happening in terms of gaps. And then we bring in a set of all the technology innovations which are happening in the sector. And then we look at building up a framework through stakeholder consultations. What could be possibly the right framework for technology governance as well as for the transformation of the sector itself. And that's where what we have realized is that it takes almost like 8 to 9 months to reach a stage where we think a theoretical framework, at least through the learnings that we have been collected through stakeholder consultations. But then the real gap is that unless and until we put it on the ground and collect the evidence from through pilots, it's very difficult to really scale a solution. So we have been working on and taking these solutions and the frameworks onto the pilots and talking to various state governments for implementing those pilots along with the industries. And it has been going pretty good well. And we will talk about some of the work that we have been doing. On sector side, our focus has been agriculture for sure has been one of the big pillar because more than 135 odd million farmers who are mostly around 85% of them are small holding farmers is one big stakeholder for us to really benefit technology. We are working on urban, which is the smart cities focus, and then another area is health. So these three big focus areas for us, which we have been working, and we will be happy to talk about the details on each of the initiatives, which we think we are pretty proud of, and also trying to see what pieces of it that we have worked on can be scaled, replicated, and we are working with the center in Colombia as well on few areas, especially smart cities and data policies, which we think our challenges are pretty similar, and happy to kind of collaborate and see how we can scale some of the frameworks and learnings that we have had in India, even in Colombia as well.
Thank you very much, Puro. I think we're going to touch on several of these issues because Colombia is also working on several of these issues. For example, agro and data policy. It's going to be a good discussion here. And now, Erez, please. Erez is the head of the C4I Colombia Center. Is very close to the Colombian government and to Colombia society and trying to advance the economy and solutions in technology. So please, Erez, the question for you is the same. So what has the center achieved so far, and what have you accomplished, please?
Thank you very much, Mario, and welcome again to Colombia. Thank you for coming all the way from San Francisco to be with us. We really appreciate that. And of course, Poo and Mariam, I know it's really late where you are, so we really appreciate your participation. The Center for the Fourth Industrial Revolution in Colombia was founded in 2019, and we are the only one in the Spanish-speaking world. So if we talk about just that fact that we have a center of that level in Colombia, I'm a foreigner with a funny name that directs the center, but even being not Colombian, for Colombian pride, that is by itself a reason of pride, because the World Economic Forum looks at Colombia as the window of IoT, AI, blockchain, and data. Just that is something that you should really understand. That is a big thing. So what do we do in this center? In our center, we are focused on these four topics. And in this year, together with Impulsa, we are managing very interesting projects. The first one is the data marketplace. As you know, the issue of data today, the governance of data, is a bit of a gray area. And what we are trying to do is find a way where data, your data, you and the companies you work in, you can use it as a resource to gain money. So taking the data that you have, putting a value to it, and then selling it to create another source of revenue for your business. The idea is that the new oxygen of the fourth industrial revolution will be data. All of you have data. A lot of multinationals are using that data without your consent and making a lot of money out of it. What we want to do is find a way for you to also gain from it. This is one of the ways that we are looking how the fourth industrial revolution can impact the lives of Colombians and of all the people of Latin America. So that's the first project we manage. We have Eduardo Gomez here. I will point him out later, that he can explain more to the people who want to know about that. The second one is agriculture, Agro 4.0. We took 10 municipalities in Colombia, from La Guajira till Caquetá, and we basically, where's Adriana? Adriana, raise your hand. Adriana is managing a super interesting project where we put sensors of IoT, so sensors of soil, water, climate, using satellite intelligence, AI to do analysis of the data we get from IoT, in order to see how we can help small and medium producers of avocado, cafe, and cacao to be more productive and more efficient. We're also using cloud computing to help them sell their products in a digital way. Adriana can tell you that we already have really nice impact just there, that these farmers within a few months managed to sell all their products, for example, managed to get a better yield. And these 10 municipios, in every farm we have these sensors, 10 others in that municipio go there to learn about how to use these technologies. Again, to look for a way how we can impact a sector that so far in Colombia has been a little bit behind regarding technology and the implementation of technology. Another thing that you should know, that the Center in Colombia manages the chapter of Latin America of the G40 Alliance. What's the G40 Alliance? Is the alliance of all the pioneer cities in ciudades inteligentes, intelligent cities. What does that mean? The team in Colombia basically advises the mayor of Mexico City, Buenos Aires, Brasilia, Bogotá, Medellin, of course, Córdoba, and in this year, 13 more cities will join, and the center in Colombia is advising them how to adopt these new technologies. More than that, we are now going to go into a phase where we're going to start actual pilots of IoTs, we will call IoT Lab, in order to showcase the technology that we can do and implement here in Colombia and then escalate to the rest of the region. Another topic that we manage as the center is the issue of incentives for adoptions of AI for small and medium businesses. This project is less of a pilot, more of a study, what we have at the moment in the marketplace in Colombia, and what incentives can we advise the Colombian government and local city mayors how to incentivize small and medium businesses to adopt AI, because at the end, as you know, more than 95% of the companies in Colombia are small and medium businesses, and if we want to use AI to make an impact, that's where we need to start. Another really nice project that was a panel this morning, and that's really, for me, is mind-blowing, is the creative industries. So blockchain, the entire topic of NFT. Our idea is to first create a guide for all of the artists of Colombia and later of Latin America, how to use NFTs as another way to gain resources as artists. Second part is create a digital gallery where you can go in with augmented reality glasses, see the art, and then buy it with either NFT or digital currency. Again, to create a way for Colombian artists to sell outside of the US, outside of Colombia. And for us, that is the way in order to prepare the artists of Colombia and actually the entire ecosystem for the metaverse. So those are the projects that we manage at the moment, and we'll dive into it a bit later. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Erez. I'd like to make a bridge with your last mention of blockchain, because blockchain can be used as a cross-cutting technology and it can be used to improve everything. It's a ledger, so you can use it to keep track of things that are happening in certain industry or certain topic. And Erez gave an example of what we can do with art and NFTs, which is really interesting, and we saw many panels with Colombian and Latin American artists here in this event. So I'd like to keep with blockchain a little bit and ask Mariam. Mariam mentioned several initiatives in blockchain. Mariam, would you like to talk a little bit about what you've done in terms of asset tokenization, and what is the impact of that framework that you developed in your center, please?
Sure. Thank you very much. And the creative industries example is very interesting, actually. So we'll need to talk more about that, Erez. In terms of the asset tokenization project, we started this a little before COVID-19, but actually COVID was, I think, a big instigator for looking at this. Very similar to what Erez was saying about Colombia, SMEs make up a significant part of Dubai's GDP, but also the UAE's GDP. And we had seen as much as I'm sure a lot of people saw around the world, that there was a substantial decrease in funding as well as an increase in bankruptcy around SMEs. So what we thought of was, how can we use this technology to be able to benefit these entities or these companies that need it the most? And as I mentioned, a lot of the work we had done previously was around the governance, but this again was more of a pilot looking at the practical elements of blockchain in this case. And maybe just if I pause for a second just on this, the reason that we had looked at blockchain is, as I mentioned, we had a blockchain strategy in Dubai from about 2016. And the cases that we had looked at previously, as I mentioned, were around logistics, they were around check fraud, they were around things like, primarily things that dealt with verification, and so the kind of verification purposes on blockchain. And we had also been able to see that the use cases for blockchain during that period from about 2016 to 2020 were vast and diverse, but there were also a lot of cases that we had jumped into as Dubai and the UAE that really didn't need blockchain. So I would say we had taken kind of a step back from this technology. But for fintech specifically, we found that there was really a clear use case here, and particularly around crowdfunding. And I'm sure a lot of people have already heard about crowdfunding. It's not that innovative as a theory or as a kind of a practical approach to finance, but for us in the UAE, it was something that was relatively new, and particularly because there was a worry about providing funding to SMEs because of the collateral primarily. The banks were not as, I guess, they are a bit more risk averse, weren't as interested in financing this. By opening up a crowdfunding mechanism that could then be verified and could be traced through blockchain, this meant that we had had an increase in investment, but we also had an increase in the number of investors, because retail investors like myself or yourself could then actually put in money into their favorite SMEs to help them stay afloat. And for us, what was, I think, most impactful about this was not just that this was something that was put forward and then put into a pilot, but that we had the financial center, so the Dubai International Financial Center, as a part of the pilot already. They then put forward kind of a license around digital assets. And now there's actually a authority that's been put in place here in Dubai called the Virtual Assets Regulatory Authority that's looking at this kind of a widespread across Dubai as a new form of regulation. So not just from a tokenization of, or the crowdfunding tokenization mechanism, but just a larger kind of asset tokenization project. And so for us, I think that was the big impact to be kind of a part of that in some way.
Thank you, Mariam. I'd like to go to Puru now, because India is a very interesting use case with that impacts more than 1 billion people. So can you tell us a little bit about blockchain initiatives in the India Center, and how it relates to Indian government initiatives in blockchain, as Mariam mentioned, a national blockchain plan. So is there something similar in the India government and in the India Center? Go ahead, please.
Yeah, Mario, sure. We are working on blockchain, but then we have also taken, as I said, an approach on sectors where blockchain can be leveraged. One of the examples that we can talk about is in the case of smart cities and also agriculture. Agriculture, the challenge has been that many locations and many geographies are producing some specific crops which are bound on the origin. And because, for example, there is a small district in one of the northeastern side of India which produces world's best turmeric. But then the challenge is that when you take the turmeric from that district back into across the world, there are many traders who mix the turmeric with some other quality of turmeric, and practically it is very difficult to trace the origin of the original, the best quality turmeric. So we are working with the state on governing, coming out with a lot of policies, and also with regard to bringing in the interventions where from source to consumption you can have a complete link through the blockchain origination, and the farmers can get the true value of their produce, so that otherwise it gets distributed across the traders and other stakeholders. So that's one of the big initiative within agriculture. Like there are challenges on maybe the right seed input, because again the quality of the seeds get intermixed. So how can we get the right seeds? How can we look at the origin of the crops? In the healthcare sector, it has been a very big piece of innovation, where blockchain is helping us in avoiding all the spurious drugs, which are kind of copied drugs in the market, and a lot of across the whole value chain that we are looking at, possibly, especially the one which are critical drugs. How do you ensure that the right drugs are, the quality is maintained, and there is no such spurious nature of stuff which goes on. So it's a sectoral approach that we are looking at. In the case of urban smart cities, there are lots of transactions which happen between the citizens and the government and the municipalities, where we are looking at interventions to be brought in leveraging blockchain. So for sure, blockchain is one of the technologies. The other piece which I would like to kind of bring additionally is that blockchain usually does not work in isolation. You will have to bring in along with the IoT. Many times you are taking the data directly from the IoT devices and trying to kind of keep it so that there is no such further manual entry of the data, and you know exactly which time, what time the data, and wherever the quality of the product or produce or whatever the transaction was is completely tracked back. So whether it's agriculture, whether it's healthcare, or whether it is urban, we are seeing that the use cases are coming across on blockchain.
Thank you, Puro. Since you mentioned the smart cities and innovations there, and Erez, you already mentioned some of the role of Cifra Colombia in the G20 Smart Cities Alliance. But would you like to deep dive a little bit and go a little bit further and talk about the next cities in the alliance, and what are the plans, and what do you see for Cifra Colombia in leading that alliance in Latin America, please?
Well, thank you. For us, with the topic of smart cities, we are looking to basically take the theory and the strategy into real live pilots. The idea is we look at the center as a double benefit for Colombia. First, bringing in IoT technology into the cities to help the life of the citizens. And second, and that's for the Colombian startups, because our mandate does not say which companies we need to use for our pilots, my interest is first to look for the Colombian startups that we can use and give them a beta site in our pilots. Because if a Colombian startup is successful in our pilots, it escalates immediately, because we recommend the government how to scale up, and to the mayors how to scale those pilots into a policy, a public policy. So not only will they scale up in Colombia, they will scale up in Latin America, because that is the entire idea. If it works somewhere, we can show it, and then the first question people will ask, oh, which company did it? So we look at the two benefits that can bring. When we talk about additional cities that want to join, so we have a list of sort of a waiting list. We have Lima, we have in Colombia, we have Cali, small cities as well are looking into it in Boyacá and other places around the country. Argentina, there's 3 or 4 that have asked to join as well. Mexico, Monterrey is really pushing. So for us, we look at this alliance as a way to basically position the 2 cities at the moment that are in Colombia, so Bogotá and Medellin, to basically showcase them as a live experiment for smart cities technologies. And to be honest, there's a lot to show and a lot to do more. So for us, we see that as a really nice opportunity to move forward.
Thank you, Erez. And I'd like to just emphasize that the idea of the network and the idea of the alliance is that cities benefit from each other, right? So we have cities that are really, really developed, like Japan and other cities. Dubai, for example, is in the alliance. And there is an exchange of experience and exchange of best practices both ways, right? They have a lot to learn from Latin American cities that are led by the Foro Colombia Center, but also they have a lot to teach as well. So that's the idea of the alliance and of the network. Every part of the network benefits from each other, and in that way there's a synergy. So that's the main point of the network. Okay, so thank you. Why don't we talk about a little bit about how Dubai is advancing in this smart city plan. And I think there's a connection with blockchain for supply chain, Mariam. I don't know if I'm mistaken, but can you please talk a little bit about this?
Yes, of course, Mario. I think in terms of the supply chain work that we've done, as I mentioned, and a lot of this, and I'm sorry I keep going back to this, but a lot of this does go back to the initial kind of national strategy around blockchain within the UAE. So as I mentioned, this was in 2016, and then there was a national one that came out in 2017. And the cases that we looked at to begin with were very focused on government services. So things like a land department, kind of the decrees that were put there, or your usual kind of plot of land. These were things that were put onto blockchain from a primarily government data perspective, just for security purposes, but also again for verification. We moved into supply chain about 2019, 2020, again, from a logistics standpoint, but also from a trade finance standpoint. So what we had seen with entities like DP World, if you've heard of that, it's one of the largest port authorities here in Dubai, was that there were a number of companies, or actually small farmers, I should say, not actually large-scale companies, that were selling their goods to, or exporting their goods to companies here in the UAE, but were not being able to get the finance that they needed because they were not kind of verified or authorized by banks here. So as you'll see, a lot of the issues go back to kind of the larger financial infrastructure as well. And so blockchain was used as the kind of portal, let's say, to tie all of the different actors within a trade finance scheme or trade finance process together. So you had the farmer in whatever country that they were in, that were then put onto the chain through, of course, different mechanisms, because we also need to deal with the maturity of the internet there, or maturity of the technology. But there were different mechanisms that were put in place for that. They were put onto the chain, and then all of the processes that you went through, from customs to the verification of the goods to IoT, for example, as Peru mentioned, within the specific good itself, for temperature checks and the likes. All of that was put onto the chain, so that by the time it came to the authorities here, all of that had been done from a paperless perspective. All of it had kind of been checked off throughout these different processes, or these different stages of the process, and the goods were then able to be sold here very quickly, without all of the stages that had been in place before, that were kind of obstacles to this to the supply chain. And so that made it much more efficient. That made kind of the security of it more efficient. It meant that goods that had gone through this process were also verified from a quality perspective, and so even things like counterfeit goods were being obstructed or hindered. So there wasn't so much of that across the kind of the trade, I guess, chains between different countries, as well as then kind of the logistics of it here within warehouses. I hope that was clear. I know there was a different parts to this process, but I hope that was clear enough in terms of how we've been looking at it.
Thank you very much, Mariam. It's a very complex topic, and it's too short of a time to go much deeper, but it's a great overview.
Yeah.
And
we usually have a diagram that goes with it, which helps I'll kind of see all the different actors that are a part of this process. But I hope some of that was clear. I'm sure Puru or anyone else can get into it as well.
Thank you. And then let me tell you that I'm here on behalf of the forum, and I'm supporting the Colombia Center. And I'm sure Erez would be happy with me to be with you after the presentation to answer questions offline. Okay? So thank you for making the mention to supply chain, Mariam. I'm going to make a jump now, because Erez mentioned some solutions that we're working on, Agro 4.0 in Colombia, and he mentioned a huge gain by use of a third industrial revolution technology with the internet to sell crops, right? Well, let's talk about how the fourth industrial revolution is affecting farmers in Colombia. Can you go a little bit deeper on how we are using IoT, data, etc., to advance the crops in all those pilots that we are doing with small and medium farmers in Colombia, please?
Yes, of course. So, as you all know, the agro sector in Colombia is not associated with technology, if we say it mildly. So what we try to do is basically prove that the technology actually has an added value to these farmers. Today we have 11 million farmers in Colombia, and as you also know, that if we're completely honest, if we will not prove that a technology of any kind actually works in Colombia and has an added value, the chance that these farmers will actually use this technology is almost zero. So that's why we started this project, to prove first that it helps, that it has something to add. Because at the end, the farmer needs to decide to invest. Technology costs money. So why should I invest money if there's no benefit? So what we started was first with issue of fertilizers, for example. Fertilizers, I don't know if you know, Colombia uses twice the amount of fertilizers actually needed. Why? Because there's no scientific way of administering these fertilizers. What is the result? Ruins water sources, ruin the soil, and at the end, the farmer, instead of using fertilizers to create more yield, it actually hurts his own yield, and it goes down. So the reaction is to put more, at the end we get to a bad result. What we brought in is basically an app called Smart Fertilizers that helps basically in a digital way tell the farmer how much does he need. So first, we save money for the farmer. He doesn't need to use as much fertilizer as he does. And now with the crisis of the Ukraine, the prices of fertilizers have skyrocketed. So there we start with saving money for him. Second, when we talk about, and how do we do that? We use the sensors of soil, because with the sensors of soil through IoT technology, we know how much nutrients the soil needs, and that's how we get there. Second, issue of water. How much water does the cultivo, what he grows, needs? More, less? Till this, if you don't use technology, you do it by ear. When you use an app, when you use technology-based sensors or decisions based on data, you change the way you work. So first, save water, and second, you use it in an efficient way. Third, when we use cloud computing, as I mentioned, all of a sudden that farmer can connect to a wide range of buyers. We open him to the new world. And when we help him become more efficient and more productive, all of a sudden that farmer is relevant in also the global market. Because if he is more efficient, more productive with his agriculture products, he's interesting for people outside of Colombia. So that is an issue to help. And now, also when we talk about the social impact, as you know, today most of the young generation in the agricultural areas is moving to the cities because they're interested more in the opportunities that the city gives. Now, when we open the possibilities of technologies, blockchain, we talked about blockchain, traceability of products, that is a big issue. Adriana is managing that as well. That is, por lo menos, so just that is interesting. It allows us also to attract the younger generation to participate in this sector. More than that, we also look to find the connection between sustainability and bring it to agriculture. So there's a lot of initiatives going around that they calculate how much carbon units these agriculture areas can reduce from the atmosphere, and that carbon unit can be sold. That is money. So for example, if we go to a coffee farmer and we offer him to plant trees using AI and satellite imaging to track how much trees he plants, there's an algorithm that calculates how many carbon units does he save to the world. Today, companies like Microsoft, Google want to be carbon neutral. How do they do that? They buy these carbon credits. Yet again, another source of revenue for farmers that till today have once or maybe twice a year a possibility to gain money in their cosecha, when they pick their fruits. If we create another possibility, it's amazing. We change the situation. Now, another thing we're talking, it connects to something we talked about, the data market. We are trying to create a data market for farmers. That's, again, Adriana, sorry that I keep on picking on you. That is what she's managing. To create a market where the farmers, the data that they collect in their cultivos is interesting for other companies, bigger companies. They will pay them money for that data. So we create another source of income to those farmers. And when I manage through technology to show to a farmer you can make money, the chance that he will use that money to invest in technology is higher. And that is at the end what we want to do. Use technology to be more productive, more efficient. So when we talk about the effect, and of course we have Pooh here, that what they're doing in India is amazing. And I'm sure we'll have the time to tell you a little bit about that as well. What we're trying to do is really make a big dent in what is going on in Colombia. Because I'll give you an example. We entered a municipio in La Guajira that till this day, no technology was installed ever, ever. All of a sudden, the The governor is coming to see this project. Why? Because all of a sudden this technology actually affected a farmer in La Guajira. You all know what that means. So what we're trying to do is really to find the technologies in the agriculture sector that can really make an impact and change that sector, because as you all know, agriculture is key for the development of Colombia.
Thank you very much, Erez. You mentioned Puru. We have to go to Puru now. The C4I India Center leads the global community of AI for AI, which is Artificial Intelligence for Agricultural Innovation. It's a nice acronym. Puru, would you like to talk a little bit about the amazing pilots that you have run with several public and private sector stakeholders in India, please?
Thank you, Mario. And Erez, it was amazing to hear the story. It was looking like you're talking about India, because more or less all the problems remain the same. Only the numbers are like we're having some 135 odd million farmers in India who are struggling. So what we have done is that we are focusing on three core objectives here through AI for AI. One is on financial inclusivity, which is 85% of the farmers being very small holding farmers, like almost like 1.3 hectares of the average patch of the land which they hold right now. It is very difficult for them to really afford and understand the technologies. So looking at how can we enable finance for them, because 70% of them do not really have any access to organized finance, which would mean that they have to borrow at 25 to 40% rate of interest, which makes agriculture unsustainable. The second challenge that we see on inclusivity itself has been the insurance part of it, the huge risk that they carry because of the weather situations. It is becoming almost like impossible for them to carry the whole risk for the crop because of the excessive rain sometimes, and maybe excessive challenges with regard to the soil, maybe the weather, the way it is behaving. So what we're looking at is using remote sensing, using also the sensors in terms of actual measurement, what kind of damage was done, and so that banks can do a proper risk cover insurance for the farmers. The second pillar that we are holding up in agriculture is mostly what Erez talked about. How can we look at providing them right digital advisories for fertilizer, for pesticides, for water, and also for the right time of harvesting, or maybe even mechanization of using machinery as a service has been a big play, because mostly farmers, they don't really understand the leverage of technology. They are only interested in the better revenues and profits for them, or maybe a better risk cover for them. So how can we, there is one use case which I can talk about, is talked about fertilizer. Pesticides have been a big challenge in India, especially like say one of the example was cotton crop. 98% of the pesticides actually not addressing the species. And so it is going into the soil, it is going into the water, and it is killing almost like 8,000 people every year because of pesticides being thrown manually and the challenges with that, with the same. So we did a pilot in one of few of the geographies, and we could help reduce the cost of the pesticides applied. That means by just kind of optimizing on the amount of pesticides to be done, how the pesticide, when it is to be deployed, and at which pesticide has to be deployed for the cotton plant. We could reduce the cost of the pesticide itself by 17%, and the yield improved by 9%. So practically it was around 20 to 23% of average revenue increase for those farmers, purely by digital advisories on pesticides. So there is so much which science can do and technologies can do with regard to just the right, and we call them the bucket of sustainability, like the right use of water, fertilizer, and pesticide. The third big intervention which we are trying to work on is in the marketplaces. Now the challenge is that 40% of the post-harvest produce is usually wasted because either it is not reaching the right end buyer at the right time, or mostly the vegetables, fruits, and horticulture crops, they are right now gets almost like killed, which practically means farmers are losing big time money. So how can we look at digital marketplaces, the right warehousing structures where we know exactly when the input had arrived, when it has to be moved, the right logistics support with regard to the maybe almost like can we make the transport available at the right point of time. So all those models beyond the point of harvest are now evolving. And you mentioned, Mario, about the public-private partnership. That has been the core pillar for us because we are not an institution which actually bring implementation. We have all the partners working for us. But public-private partnership, the Ministry of Agriculture has engaged World Economic Forum for driving the public-private partnership framework. And we are looking at pillar, and it is mentioned about data. Data is the biggest unlocking factor for any agriculture innovation to happen. We have worked across the ecosystem and come out with a data set, 15 data sets, which are almost unlocking around $60 billion of incremental growth within the agriculture sector. And these are data like GIS-based land records, the crop history, remote sensing data, soil health data. So it's a significant chunk of enablement which needs to be done. We worked with one of the state governments. The challenge has been that the data belongs to the farmers. It's not practically, cannot be just made available to any private institution. So we worked on a consent layer with one of the state governments. So all the data which is coming in from the ecosystem is now going through a consent layer, and then it is being enabled so that your point is earlier you mentioned about the data, the money is being made by all the multinationals. So we understand that kind of a concern. We came out with this whole policy for enabling agri data exchange, that the consent is absolutely required to make it happen. So for sure, agriculture data is one of the biggest lever. The second lever, which we are working with many of the research institutions, where we are looking at creating sandboxes. So the challenge is with regard to who will do the validation of these solutions before they are launched on a scale. And similarly, how do you really look at co-innovation, because many of the startups may not have the understanding of the agriculture domain. So how can you look at co-innovation and validation through the sandboxes has been another pillar. So it's a big opportunity. 60% of the population that we talked about, 1.3 billion, is involved in agriculture and allied occupations. So it is absolutely important, and that's where we think we can converge with Colombia and with similar geographies and share the learning that we have had to scale these solutions and leverage technologies and public-private partnerships.
Thank you very much, Puru. We want to end at 12:30. We don't want to invade your lunchtime, okay? So I think I'm going to ask now for final considerations. I would like to give the floor to all of you here to give your final considerations. I'm going to, but just like to highlight some of the topics that Puru mentioned, like the importance of data. Everyone mentioned the importance of data, but also the creation of a new mindset. Regulatory sandbox is a new way of creating regulation, very much participatory and iterations and testing regulations and policy before they are implemented for real to see what are their impacts. So it's a difference in the way of doing things as well. I would like to go to each panelist, and we have 2 minutes. So very quick, a shot here. I would like to start with Mariam. Mariam, what are the plans for the center? What are you going to tackle now? And then afterwards we go to Puru, and then we'll finalize with Erez. Mariam, please, 1 minute. Thank you.
Sure. I'll try 30 seconds. From our side, we're trying to expand our portfolio. So it's not just looking at the three that I mentioned in terms of AI, blockchain, and precision medicine, but really looking at how 4IR can basically take over kind of all aspects of our life and all these different sectors that we're looking at here in the UAE, and then also within the Dubai Future Foundation, which is the host entity. And then really, as I mentioned, looking at it from a social perspective, ensuring that there is the inclusivity aspect looked at when we develop anything within tech or when we use technology for anything within these sectors. And then again, kind of maybe the auditing aspect of it as well, being able to, once we've implemented something, actually measure the impact of it, but also ensure that the data and the kind of the input mechanisms that we're putting in place are then actually overseen, and there is human oversight in all of the work that we're doing.
Thank you very much, Mariam. Puru, please, very quickly, 1 minute. What are you going to do now in C4I India?
Mario, two things. One is 4IR for the larger social good, as we have been working on in various sectors. And two would be public-private partnerships. That's the core that we would like to kind of play to the best and make a real impact for our partners and really create a future which is pretty much they look forward for.
3 minutes. 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 3 min Thank you very much, Puru. Now, Erez, it's your chance to talk about your dream, the Moonshot project, a data market. What are you going to do now with that and other initiatives as well, please?
Yeah, so I have a dream to create the Bolsa de Datos, or the stock exchange of data of Colombia. That will be the stock exchange data of Latin America, and to have it here in Colombia. So I have a team that is trying to deal with my dream and create that. And we're looking at the moment how to do that and with who to do that. We're going to expand our agricultural project. We're going to expand our blockchain projects. And to be honest, I'm looking for new projects. So people in the crowd that are interested and have ideas, I'm all ears. And that connects to another thing. We are part of the World Economic Forum network. But it's not for the center. It's for Colombia. Please, please, look at the website of the WEF, of our center. See if there is something that can add for your work, for your study, whatever you are thinking. Because at the end, we pay to be part of this network. And this network can reach basically anyone on the globe. Look, we have here, I'll just give an example. I'm sorry that I'm going over time. Mariam in Dubai, for example. She's part of the Dubai Future Foundation. I had the privilege to go visit that. Just because of that, that opened amazing opportunities, not for the center, but for Colombian companies. Now they're participating in things in Dubai. That opens, that shows that the possibilities that this network can offer for Colombians. We don't use it. We don't use it. Please look for it. Use it. This is why we pay for it, and that's why it's there. Because we can talk about globalizing the Colombian economy, but if we don't try, if we don't use the tools that we have, it will continue to be a conversation. But we actually have here a tool that you can use. It's available to you, and again, use it, please.
Thank you very much for all of the speakers, Mariam, Puru. It's night time at Friday, so thank you very much. Have a great weekend. Thank you for all your insights. Erez, I think we can be here to answer questions from the audience, right? Yo quería despedirme de ustedes en español, mi portuñol, ¿ok? Gracias, muchas gracias por la atención de ustedes. Es un placer estar aquí. Yo creo que ustedes vieron un panel con opiniones muy importantes. Estaremos aquí para aclarar sus cuestiones. Yo y Erez, en nombre del Foro Económico Mundial, en nombre del Centro de la Cuarta Revolución Industrial de Colombia.
Colombia.
Que tenga un buen almuerzo, un buen fin de
To
semana.
have a good lunch, very good weekend, and see you soon. Thank you very much.